Okay, so let's please just get us started, if you would, by giving us a little bit about your background and experiences that you think have led you to this decision to run for this position, and what experience you bring to the table that you think would make you a good mayor.
Yeah. So I am a Dubuque native, born and raised here. Grew up on the north end of town. Went to school at Jefferson Junior High School. I went to Fulton Elementary School. So, it was a very Dubuque experience growing up. Graduated from Dubuque Senior in 1993. I then went on and played a little bit of college football at Simpson College after that. And then I went into the military. In 2005, I joined the U.S. Army. I ended up going through assessment and selection for special operations, and I served 8 years as an Army Ranger. I had 5 combat deployments, all to Iraq, and had over 500 missions overseas. And I earned the Bronze Star Medal through my time there. Once that was finished in late 2012, I chose to, move back to Dubuque and start my post-military life here. I wanted to raise my kids here, and I currently have 2 children of my own that are school age and go through the public schools. I have a 15-year-old daughter who's a freshman at Hempstead, and then I have a 10-year-old son who is a 4th grader at Eisenhower. I continue to serve. I've worked for nonprofits throughout, at the end of my military career and throughout the time since I've been out, advocating, helping them raise money. Even for Patriotic Service Dog Foundation, I had one of their dogs that I helped train. They're based out of California, but I had them in Dubuque with me for 3 months, training and getting them ready for a veteran or first responder to take. And now I work for a nonprofit. I work at the Dubuque Community Y as the communications and fund development director. I believe that, I have a lot of life experience through there, my military career and my time overseas and the leadership that I had in that, and everything that I learned in the military, and now in my post-military working for a nonprofit, I think fits in well with, the opportunity to run for public office and, the mayor position specifically. I think my experience is as much, if not more, as far as leadership goes, as would be expected for someone running for office. And, I'm excited for the opportunity. It's been quite the learning experience being able to, knock on doors and have the opportunity to talk to, so much of our community. I've been learning a lot, about, everybody's thoughts, their challenges, their successes. It's been great. It's been eye-opening as well.
Well, thank you for your service. That's quite an illustrious career you have had in the military, and very admirable. So,
Thank you.
say that first off. But yeah, running for public office is another kind of service. What makes you start with the office of mayor versus, I guess, first of all, have you held any other government, like served on any boards or commissions or things like that? Or why start with mayor?
I was on the Long Range Training Advisory Commission. And that's kind of where my public service, or looking to get into, public service, got
For
a little
the
stronger.
city, the long range planning, is that what you said?
Yes, yes, and that was for the city. But besides that, I have not held another public office like that.
How long did you serve on that planning commission?
I served, I think it was a short time, 5 months. And then when I announced that I was running for mayor, I stepped aside because July 1st would have, I guess re-upped my time. So I filled a slot of someone who left early.
I see.
So then I was in there until July 1st, but I wanted
Mhm,
someone to be, to go in there that would be able to serve a full term.
mhm,
So that's why I stepped aside on that. But from the time I got back from my service, it was something that was, that I was thinking about what ways I could, get back involved in my community. Like I said, I work for nonprofits and, I enjoyed that side of things, but, I wanted to get involved a little bit more. And as
mhm.
far as mayor, before I knew what I was going to run for and was just thinking about it, I reached out and talked with all the council members, including the mayor. I just was asking them, what the job was like, what the time commitment was, um, how they, first of all, how they liked it. Um, and
Lost him?
all right,
Hey,
I'm back.
okay, we lost you there a minute.
Yeah.
Looks like we're still got our recording going. Okay, let's see. Picking back up. You said you met with council members and the mayor and were asking them about how they liked their role and kind of what it entailed and the time commitment.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you
And
came from that more interested in the mayoral seat than the council seat?
I was just based on what I thought fit my leadership skills, and my strengths, um, which I believe was, being able to partner, communicate and collaborate with, our other community partners, within our community. And I think it just fit what, my idea of service could be to our community.
What kinds of things do you think uh, fall on the mayor's plate as opposed to everyone on the council?
Well, from talking with Brad prior to doing that, I asked him what other, what boards he was on, commissions he was on. And he serves on many different, like he's on the chamber, the DRA, Dubuque Initiatives, Fly DBQ, to name a few. So, I thought it was interesting that, that he had that opportunity and was on those boards and was able to, have a broader effect in the community in that way.
Mm-hmm. And what ways have you been, I guess, involved in local government? Have you followed things in the issues pretty closely? You're a regular voter, that kind of thing, prior to running for office? Did you feel pretty familiar with all the issues prior to this?
Yes, I did. I mean, in a broad sense, obviously. I think I was more involved than the average person. Um, but over, during COVID and that time is when I really started, you know, getting into the issues on our local government level.
Mm-hmm. Are there particular issues that, I mean, obviously we know air service and housing have been kind of bubbled to the top of, community conversations. Were there specific issues driving you that you feel you would represent a different viewpoint than the current leadership?
Yeah, I think the main thing is how the process was working with our current form of government, with the council manager style of government that we have. I think the processes and kind of the imbalance that I was seeing as far as the people of Dubuque, our elected council leadership, and then city leadership. I was feeling like there was starting to be an imbalance on that from what I think it should have been. I think a lot of the balance shifted to some of the city administrator, and I think that need to be back into balance and more balance and make sure the people were getting more of a voice.
So you think that is an issue that the council should have been dealing with differently than as it has been?
I do. And for the reasons of, the council, oversees, the city manager and the city leadership as far as, being accountable, the transparency portion of it. And, and this goes back to my short time on the commission, that I think a lot of the information that they got, the city council members and mayor, was coming to them prepackaged. I think that's the best way I think I can say it. And I don't think they were necessarily getting all the information or asking the right questions to receive all the information they needed on some of those decisions.
Is there a specific issue you would point to and say they didn't get the full story there, and that should have gone differently?
Yeah, and it goes to my time on the commission. Some of our building incentives or developer incentives that we were using, which I think it's great. We need that, and if we want, to build housing and, to bring family friendly opportunities to Dubuque, we need some of that, and it actually helped bring some, builders back to the area who were here previously that started building in surrounding areas that came back. But my concern about it is that we never had, so let's just say like an urban revitalization or urban renewal tax abatement. We would know what it would be for that specific development. Say it was, a 10-year tax abatement for one of the developers. I was always wanting to know like a running total. Like, so if we have 7 developments, I'm just throwing these numbers out there, but 7 developments and they were all getting some sort of a tax incentive, I wanted to know what that overall number would be, basically keeping a running total. So if each of those 7, like I said, I'm just throwing numbers out there, were $50,000 of incentives, I wanted to know what that total was as we move forward. And when they were making decisions on those developments, that never came up. The council never asked that question. So if they did know it, it wasn't presented in a way that, the rest of us knew it. And those were some of the questions that I asked when I was on the commission. Example, the apartments that are going up on Cedar Cross Road, it came to the Long Range Planning Advisory Commission to make a recommendation to the city council on that. And that was at the time when, for them to start, there were some sewer issues still. They didn't know if, they'd be able to hook up to the sewers and how that was going to work. So that was kind of what they were bringing it in front of us for. But then they were talking about a 10-year tax abatement. So I asked about that, and they didn't have any information for that project itself. The city couldn't give me a number of what that would be over the 10 years that they had. So I actually abstained from the vote on that. Not because I didn't think that it should have moved forward, but because I didn't feel like I had all the information make that recommendation.
So it was like a 10-year TIF, tax increment financing, or?
Well, this one was, I think it was an urban revitalization
Okay.
incentive.
And they couldn't put a value on what that would be over 10
Not at the
years?
time when we were voting, and I asked, and I was told that I would get that information the following morning, and I never received it.
So Jason, when you say they
Mhm.
didn't provide that information, who specifically is they? The council, the city manager, city staff?
Nope. It's city staff. So it's city planning staff who runs that board, that commission.
Okay.
And Jason, just to be kind of clear on the timing there, is that something you asked at the meeting when the vote was scheduled, or was that something you asked in advance so that they could plan for, prepare, or collect that information in advance before the vote?
I asked during the meeting, but for those commissions, we don't get the packet until that afternoon, until we meet. So it was, I work full time as well. These are volunteer commissions, and, I didn't necessarily have an opportunity to read through the entire portion of that. But I actually did on this one, and I brought the question with me to the meeting. But there really wasn't, I don't know what time we get it, but we usually get it that afternoon of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Do you, are there other issues, I guess, that were pivotal in your interest in running for office that maybe you think the council's been moving the wrong direction, or the leadership?
Yeah, I think there's a few of them. First of all, the sanitary sewer issues, that was, something that I think a long-term plan, could have really had, some major effect on being in a position where, there was a moratorium on building in certain areas of the city because the sewer was at capacity and wasn't able to. Now, they're addressing it. When I say they, the council in the city is addressing it now with, the Old Mill Road, pump station, lift station. But I felt like that was a little late in the game, that we would have had a better plan moving forward.
That they just didn't have a long-term plan, or they didn't?
Yeah, they didn't prioritize that. And we knew that the sewer system was getting close to capacity. We were doing work at the station itself, and with, Simmons and,
Mhm.
the amount of water that they were producing, and that was going into our system. There was a flexion point there. I just think, it could have been addressed earlier than what it was.
So would you say that you think the city should have been spending more on sanitary sewer infrastructure over the last 5 to 10 years?
I do. I think that should, along with other infrastructure projects and our public safety, those should be the first, couple things that you budget for. And a lot of the other things are based on what those budgets look like.
Mm-hmm. Because that's always kind of the balance, right? That what, where to spend the dollars, and that's something, yes, people have been critical of the council for. So yeah, I'm always curious to hear about where people think maybe they should have spent more or spent less. So are there other areas that you think, to make more money, to room for in the budget for more sanitary sewer spending, what areas would you say they were overspending?
I'm not sure exactly on that question. But I look at it as, with our public safety, the infrastructure, including the sewers, those should be, and our parks should be the first things that get funded. So once those are fully funded, as far as, the projects that we need to have the city move forward, then, we look at the other departments or the other projects and that aren't necessarily infrastructure or critical infrastructure needs for the city. And I think those would have to take, a step aside, whatever those ones would be.
And you said public safety would be among those top priorities for you?
Yes, one of the top.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I think one of the issues, we've seen over the last years has been just hiring, being able to hire for particularly, police and fire. Is there a way that you think the city could have spent money that might have helped incentivize filling those positions, or what would more spending have done to solve that problem?
Yes, and I know for a little while they were kind of restricted as far as the state regulations had on how they could hire them, like when they could send them, through the initial physical testing and then get them off to the academy, specifically for the police department. But those were lifted by the state, I believe 12 or 18 months ago. So now they're having the opportunity to, have more of those classes, and it wouldn't have to be just one time a year or other time of year. But I think it was important that, knowing that for a lot of years we've been down. I know now we're down at least 14 safety officers, police officers. I think that could have been addressed right when the state allowed the cities to change those rules, but they waited a little bit. And when I say they, the council waited a little bit to approve that for our public safety officers.
Okay. And is there more spending on the fire department side of the house that you think is needed? Are you a person supporting building another fire station, or
I do.
that gets talked about here and there?
I do. I support building another fire station. That obviously would help, with response times. It would be a service to the community as a whole. And I also am a proponent of, them adding more firefighters or EMS to, the fire trucks to get along with the national standards of 4. I know, when we talk about budgeting, it would be difficult to just immediately do that. But it needs to be a priority to build that into our budget. And I will say I toured a couple of our fire stations, including headquarters, and they're going through a little bit of renovation right now. But I was very disappointed in their facilities. Even the simple things as their training room, where they would do certifications and those type of things on the computer, where they would study. I mean, the office furniture was something that was worse than what I had in my college dorm room. It was, I was embarrassed that we would allow that to happen. And it wasn't just at that station. I went to the one down on Central as well, and toured that place, and it was in the same boat. So, I mean, I think, and those our firefighters, our EMS, spend a good portion of their life, there, because they sleep there on their shifts. So I was actually shocked to see that, and a little bit embarrassed. And I think that's, also a priority that
Jason,
we need to work on.
With your comments on the furniture and the disappointed in some of the surroundings, are you aware of whether or not the fire chief requested any funding from the city council to replace any of that? And if so, was it denied?
I do not know. I do not know that question.
I'll let my colleagues jump in here on some of our other issues.
I have a couple of questions, not at this point yet related to issues, but at the beginning, you had said that you feel like you have as much leadership as would be needed to be mayor. And then in your comments posted on the TH Media website and in the TH, you said that you have more relevant experience than the incumbent when he was elected. Talk about what specific leadership skills you feel like you have that makes you more qualified to be a mayor than most people, or what skills and leadership you have that is more than what the current mayor had when he was elected.
I have a lot of real world experience, and especially in, my 8 years in the military. I was in special operations, so obviously it was a little, different than, a standard infantry soldier. Going through my assessment and selection programs to get into special operations, and then going through Ranger School, where, Ranger School is a leadership school. I was the honor graduate and enlisted leadership award recipient going through that school. And that is a peer voted position, meaning that the others that were in my group, we would peer each other every week, meaning we would vote on, who we thought was doing the best, who was the best leader, who was helping out the team the most. So that was something that I'm very proud of, because it wasn't like the instructors or anyone were looking at that and doing that. That was all from within ours. So planning 500 missions that I went on, probably more than that. I had to deal with multiple assets. So when we went out on a mission, left the wire, we were controlling, our air assets, our ground assets, other units we were communicating with that were in the area. We had multiple plans every time we went out. We wanted to make sure that we set the conditions, in our advantage as much as we could, and then had contingency plans if things didn't go exactly the way we planned. So going through those, planning routes, planning exfil routes, talking with our helicopter pilots, when we're on the ground, finding places for them to land. Just that combination of, all these different facets of planning, and then getting all, the platoon, the strike force, whatever it was that we were going out with, onto the same page, and, to follow me outside the wire.
Okay. Well, and
Jason,
again, echoing
go
what
ahead.
Amy said, thank you for your service to our country. One follow-up that kind of goes along with this is, in reference to your time as on the Long Range Training and Advisory Commission, you talked about getting the meeting agenda in the afternoon, and you have a full-time job, and you didn't necessarily have time to review stuff on a regular basis. How are you going to strike a balance with a full-time job to be the mayor?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously it is, an important thing to think about. At that time I was working for the Alzheimer's Association, and my responsibilities were a little bit different then. I traveled quite a bit when I worked there. So when I moved to the Y, it's a different situation. So the Y is very supportive of, like being here with you guys today, of taking the time to do some of these things. So I will have the opportunity. We know when the city council meetings are, and, I'll be able to, more than enough be there and have the time to do the mayor responsibilities.
Including, as you referenced earlier, involvement in the chamber board, the DRA board.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, Tony's Tony Calabrese. I don't know if I know Bob knows Tony.
Yep, I know Tony well.
Yep, he's an awesome guy, and he's been supportive from the beginning.
What about budgeting, Jason? I mean, that's a big piece of this, determining spending and how to spend city dollars. Obviously, being stewards of taxpayer dollars, and an enormous budget can be daunting for some. What's your experience like in handling budgets?
See, I had to do that in the military as well. So I had, as a squad leader, I had 10 to 12, other rangers that I was responsible for. I was responsible for all their equipment, all of our training. And, especially when we went overseas, I had to sign for, millions of dollars of equipment. So every training cycle that we went into, we had to go through and go over a budget of what we thought, that we had to turn into our commanders. So there are some pretty big numbers, not as big in numbers necessarily as the city, but those are numbers that I actually helped and put together. As far as the council, I know that they don't necessarily come up with the specific budgets. The departments and the city manager bring that information to them, and then they make decisions based off that. And, I'm very familiar as far as, how the budgetary process works and, making decisions on that, especially when you have, and, and as mayor, mayor has one vote just as the other city council members have. So I think it's a collaborative effort when you're looking at the budgetary process and then for each of those departments.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Jason, my
Ally.
question is, so, one thing that has recently come under the radar is Mike Van Milligan's plan to retire here in the next couple of years. I'm curious about, and the folks who are elected to the council this year will be part of that process of finding that replacement. So I'm curious about, one, what kind of qualities would you look for in a new city manager? And two, what kind of vision would you want that person to cast, and how would it be, similar to or different from the current city manager?
Yeah, I would be looking for someone that had a little bit of experience in that role. Not in, like necessarily just a city planning role somewhere. I want in, a city administrator or city manager position. Mike has big shoes to fill. 30-ish years he's been here, and he's moved Dubuque from what we were in the 80s to what we are now, and I think he's done a great job over the years. So, someone that has to have a little bit of familiarity with Dubuque. We're a unique place, so the planning process is a little more challenging, I think, than you look at, like a completely flat like Waterloo or, Cedar Falls area. So I think that experience is what would be key. And then also someone who is going to work with the council hand in hand as we go through, all the processes that a city manager has to look at. That collaboration and that transparency and openness, I think, is going to be a big key. So, that we're still able to have a good relationship with that person.
Would you support a transparent process in hiring, that the applicants for the position be revealed to the citizens?
Absolutely. Whatever. I absolutely would. I would love to have, public input. And when I say that, not public input through like a third party or, through at a council meeting where it's, most people don't want to come up and speak because it's a tough environment to do that. But yes, I would. Up to is whatever is allowed under, like our city ordinance or codes or whatever, the city attorney would allow in that regard. But yes, I would advocate for the most transparency on that.
Right answer.
Jason, a couple of questions for you. A lot of the roles you had in the military as a ranger were very much operational. How do you see, what do you see as the role, respective roles of the city council versus city staff?
Well, I think the city council is a conduit to the people, to all of us citizens. We take what the council takes, what the people are telling them what their goals, what their challenge is, what they would like to see in the city. And the council puts all that together, and it's their job to present that not only to the public, but also to the city staff. And once the council decides and votes on, what they think is best for our community based on what the people told them, then that's what they get to the city administration, the city planning, or the next city manager, the current city manager, to follow those guidelines that the city council came up with. So I see it as a big role, Bob, to be that intermediary with, our everyday citizens of Dubuque and the city leadership.
And then the council, as it does every year, had their planning session a little bit later than normal this year because of scheduling. Are there any, they came up with a list of top priorities and a list of high priorities. Are there any of the ones that they came up with that you disagree with, or ones that you think should have made the list that didn't?
I think they ended up even expanding the list a little bit. And I think they had 15 instead of 10 on there. For the most part, I agree with what they have on there. And I think since it's it's campaign season, a lot of the challenges that myself and some of the other candidates have been talking about have finally got to the forefront of, public discussion. And I think a lot of what we were talking about ended up making it on to what those goals and priorities were. I mean, I think it's important, like they're looking at the, the infrastructure side of things. I think that's great that they have that on there and high on the list. I think it's great that, a multi-sport center facility was on their priority list. But I'm really, I'm also anxious to, see what Project 2030 comes up with tomorrow. Is that tomorrow, Thursday? Yeah, what they present to us tomorrow. I'm really, looking forward to seeing what that is. And, based on what those are, because I feel like there's probably going to be some of those that are gonna overlap, that, those ones that are based on what the community wanted. I'm hoping that those become a higher priority with the council once those are revealed.
And to clarify, the Envision 2030, that's a separate process that's being led by the Community Foundation and the Chamber. That's not related to the council.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Nope. Yep. I understand that, but I know the council as well is interested to see what these are.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Clarifying.
And then I'm sure somebody in our group's going to ask, but I'll do it. One of those that's listed is air service, and
Yes.
so interested in your thoughts on the situation with air service, the process for getting where we are, the plan going forward, and what you would do differently, if anything, and what you support or don't support.
Yeah. First off, I just want to make it clear that I support commercial air service. I know that's been a topic that I have brought up, and it's definitely been a hot button as of late. I wasn't happy with the process of how we got to having to take a big chunk of taxpayer money to supplement the minimum revenue guarantee. And the reason why is because I know the grant money ran out in May, April, and we didn't hear about us being in a situation where we needed money until September. My critique is that why wouldn't you let us know that right away, so that we can start working through it and talking about it, and maybe finding a better solution than last minute, using our taxpayer funds to do that. One other critique that I would have on air service is that the council voted and okayed to use those funds to supplement that through, I think, June of next year. But I didn't hear anything different that they planned on doing. And when I say they, I'm talking about the council and the mayor, that is going to be different from what they're currently doing now, that hasn't allowed us to get to where we need to be for it to be self-funded and efficient. I know they allocated a little more money for marketing, I mean, which I think is good, but I think there needs to be a little bit different of an approach, because what we're doing isn't getting us to where we need to be.
So can you expand on that a little bit? You said that you would have liked to have seen a better solution and maybe a different approach. Can you say what those would be in your mind?
Yeah, I think we should have went to the business community earlier. So when we knew that we were on the hook for, 2 or 3 months already of the minimum revenue guarantee, or what was remainder of the minimum revenue guarantee, it should have been known to the public so that we could have started rallying the public. I know they're asking for, the business community to chip in 750,000, I think was the number. But they're putting it on their backs at the last minute. They want to get that by December. And, I think that's going to be a challenge. I think it's wishful thinking to think they're going to get that support in this short a time. So that's what I mean by that. That's what I would have done differently.
So are you suggesting that something should have been done before representatives of Dubuque Air went out and met with business leaders, I don't know, several months ago, and started asking for support?
Yes, I think they should have let it known to us as a public that minimum revenue guarantee, though that money ran out, the contract auto renewed, and that the city was on the hook for whatever that difference is from the passengers that we had traveling to meet that minimum revenue guarantee. So yes, differently than that. I mean, I wasn't involved in those discussions or those conversations. So I don't know how that came about as far as what they all said, but it didn't sound like they were asking for $750,000 in new money. So I'm thinking that, they didn't get commitments when they went out talking to, the businesses or whoever they talked to at that time.
So I guess, there certainly are conversations to be had about kind of how that was handled in the past over the last several months. Given the situation that we have now, what do you think is the way forward with air service?
I mean, we have to do whatever we can to keep it, and but doing it in a way where we don't have the taxpayers have all the burden on us. It's a complicated issue, obviously. Me personally, I would be living in the back pockets of our state and federal legislators, trying to make this happen. I know, the leadership and Fly Dubuque and them have talked about they've tried everything, and the EAS grant and all that there's nothing else that we can do as far as that. I always look at it as, the more pressure, the more advocacy, the more you can get in front of them, either on the phone or in person, to try to make something happen is important. And then I think there's another angle on it, as I was, talking to, a few people that know more about, the inner workings of managing an airport. And that is to, look with and try to advocate and get with the FAA to try to help. I don't know if you would say reclassify or do something, because our airport is busy. Our airport is busy in general because of the University of Dubuque School. And maybe there's a way that we can, work with the FAA to reclassify their flights to allow us to qualify for some of those federal funds and getting that federal. I'm not sure if that has been approached yet, from what I heard. I mean, I haven't been able to confirm it. What I heard, that hasn't, that avenue. But that would be something different to look into.
So when the chamber and members of the community went out and met in Washington, D.C., regarding a number of things, including air service, and my understanding is the message came back from from our federal representatives that this is a local problem. This has to be solved locally. The federal government cannot solve it at this point. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, in which they did, and they came back. But I always think there's different ways to approach that. Like I said, living in their back pocket to make sure it's a priority, that they know it's a priority. If there's other cities and other airports, especially even in Iowa, that qualify for this, we need to do everything that we can to get on that too. Like I said, going with the FAA, and I heard as well from people that were there out there. I don't know if any of you guys were there at those meetings in DC. But I heard they were pretty contentious as far as, the dialogue back and forth there. So I don't know if that necessarily was a help. But like I said, I wouldn't give up on that. I wouldn't give up on that.
I think we're just about out of time. one other topic I wanted to hit. You mentioned parks as a priority. Can you give us just a quick summation of I mean, the city has a plan now specifically for Eagle Point and for some of the other parks. Are you in agreement with that, or how do you think you might handle the parks priority differently?
I'm on board with what we're doing for the parks now that we allocated that. I think it was 1.5 million to all the parks, and I think 600 and something thousand to Eagle Point Park. I think that's great. I think, it's been needed for a long time. And, however we got here to get that money to support our parks is great. Again, I think some of it goes back to just the awareness and, putting it in front of city council as far as, me as a candidate, some of us as a candidate, hearing it from, constituents in every neighborhood that's a priority to them. I think that helped as well to get that, money right now to be allocated there. Because I know a month or 2 months ago, it wasn't necessarily, that priority for the council to make that happen right now.
Okay.
So I'm happy it is. Very happy.
Okay. And just, I guess in closing, what would any final pitch you would say if you were talking to voters today? Why make a change in the mayor's seat? What do you bring to the table that we're not currently getting?
I think it's the transparency piece and the piece to, bring everybody to the table. Like I said, as I'm out talking with our residents, there's a big percentage of them that don't feel like their voices are heard. And I think that's a difference that I will bring. I committed to having, a public open forum, once a month when I'm in there. And I think that's important to talk directly with the people where they're at, directly with our residents where they're at. Like I said, instead of through a third party. And when I say a third party, one of, like when they're doing the uniform development code adjustments, they had a lot of public input, but it's all filtered through, that third party. So I think sitting down, with our residents and hearing from them on a regular basis is what would set me apart.
Okay. Well, told you we'd keep you about 45 minutes. We're running just a little past. So I appreciate your time today, Jason. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for stepping up in public service and in the many ways that you have. So good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time, guys. Thank you for doing this and talking with all of us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye.
Let me shut down my recording here.